So remember, I went to Brandeis at a time where the internet was just starting. So we didn't have social media and we didn't have cell phones. So slightly different context as well about how the value of emotional intelligence, how it works, right? Because I think it's more complicated now, for sure. And I think that the youth of today have more disadvantages in you know, like when you're feeling a little bit lonely, you can retreat to social media, you know, and you can avoid having to have difficult conversations. You can turn on your TikTok and cry to your cell phone in your room by yourself, and you can get lots of likes and external affirmation, but that's not vulnerability. Go have that exact same conversation and cry to the friend that hurt you. That's way more difficult. And I think we avoid those conversations because it's just easier. And I think on balance, not exclusively, but on balance, we see a younger generation that's very afraid of being uncomfortable. They like to avoid discomfort on balance. And so one of the things that I learned at Brandeis was being uncomfortable. You know, I've got a roommate for the first time. I had a roommate who I signed up to live with a non-smoker. Okay. My roommate signed up to be with a non-smoker. Turns out my roommate was a smoker who didn't want to live with a smoker. You're an asshole, right? So now I got to live with a smoker, right? I had to learn to live with that. I had to learn to live with a roommate that used to screw with my stuff because he thought it was cool with his friends. And so like he'd like just screw with my stuff. And so I learned to not believe in revenge, right? I learned not to believe in revenge. And the reason is simple, is because when we did have a fight, I could say, you did this and this and this and this, and he couldn't say anything because I don't believe in revenge. I didn't do anything back, right? I learned that skill because of my useless roommate my freshman year at Brandeis. I had to learn it. It was a survival mechanism. Otherwise, I'm going to be screaming and yelling all the time, right? And two rights don't make a wrong. I had to learn that too, right? But one of the best lessons I learned at Brandeis, and one of the great things about Brandeis, as a relatively small school, you have relatively small class sizes, and more importantly, you have very, very small student to teacher ratios. You know, our classes are taught by professors. You go to Harvard, they're going to be taught by TAs because all of the good professors go work with the graduate students, right? So you get access to brilliant, brilliant people in small class sizes. This is amazing. This is a gift. And one of the things that I learned was that I am allowed to disagree with someone who has more degrees and more letters at the end of their name than I do, as long as I can make a constructive and respectful argument. Screaming and yelling is not the way I disagree. Telling somebody that they're wrong is not the way I disagree. But mounting an argument in a respectful way is something I learned at Brandeis. So I would have the emotion to disagree, but I had to learn how to disagree in a constructive way. Very grateful to Brandeis for giving me that, and that I could do it in these small class sizes where I could talk directly to the authority. So super grateful for a lot of the human skills that I learned at Brandeis. And I think one of the great things that we learn in college, whether, there's a lot of debate whether college is useless or not in this modern day and age. And yes, I mean, the studying part may or may not be useful. But it's a halfway house to the real world, and I think that you're learning to transition to adulthood. You're learning to transition to independence. And most importantly, you learn to think critically, where college is very different than high school. And the way professors talk to you and the way you can talk to your professors is very different than high school. And critical thinking is the thing you need to do. And you're talking to professors who don't necessarily know the answers themselves. In high school, they know all the answers, right? And so it's about problem solving. And that's really hard when sometimes there is no right answer. That's even harder. You're doing work in your category where sometimes there actually is no answer. And so what you're teaching is how to think, not what the answer is. And that skill, how to think rather than know the answer for the test, is more valuable in my life than pretty much anything I've ever learned.